I am Iron Man. There is something incredible that the very best movie franchises can create. A feeling that doesn't end when the credits roll. It carries on for months, sometimes even years, until the next chapter finally arrives. And that feeling's anticipation. The anticipation that comes from loving a story so much that you genuinely can't wait to see where it goes next. Iron Man. Think about The Empire Strikes Back. People waited for 3 years to find out if Vader was really Luke's father.
I am your father.
Think about the time between the Two Towers and the Return of the King. People spent a year imagining the final battle with Sauron and wondering who would live and who would die.
You're a filthy little myth.
Or Infinity War. For a year, people argued, theorized, rewatched the movies, and wondered how the Avengers could possibly win.
You should have gone for the head.
That waiting time wasn't empty. It was fully part of the experience, because the best movie franchises don't just entertain you for those few hours in the cinema, they give you something to look forward to for years. And that's something that's incredibly difficult to create and even harder to get back once it's gone. Marvel has spent the last few years trying to recapture that feeling.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet the new Avengers.
Marvel wants another Endgame, and honestly, I understand why. Because for about 5 years there, Marvel wasn't just making movies, it was making events. People weren't asking, is the next Marvel movie any good? They were asking, when can I see it? That is an incredibly rare position for any studio to be in. And now, Marvel is trying to recreate that feeling with Avengers Doomsday. The Russo brothers are back, familiar characters are returning, and Robert Downey Jr. is back into the MCU. And on paper, that sounds like the perfect recipe. Get the directors behind Infinity War and Endgame, bring back one of the most beloved actors in the history of the franchise, and reform the biggest superhero team in the world. What could possibly go wrong? Well, trouble is, I think Marvel misunderstood the one thing that made Infinity War and Endgame work, because Marvel seems to believe audiences miss spectacle. I don't think they do. I think audiences miss investment. They miss having a reason to care, because Infinity War and Endgame weren't loved because they had the most superheroes. They weren't loved because every character showed up for the biggest fight ever. They were loved because audiences spent 10 years watching these characters become something. The spectacle of those films was the reward. The 10-year investment was the reason. And that is the mistake Marvel is making. It is trying to recreate the payoff without rebuilding the journey that made the payoff possible. Marvel spent 10 years building emotional credit. Now it's trying to make withdrawals from an account audiences stopped contributing to. And that is why Avengers Doomsday is going to be interesting. Because Marvel has brought back the people who created the magic. The only question is, can they bring back the magic itself?
It's not possible.
The reason the Infinity Saga worked is actually pretty simple. Marvel made audiences care before it asked them to celebrate. I know that sounds obvious, but somehow it has become one of the hardest things for Hollywood to understand. Because audiences don't become invested in characters because they are famous. They become invested because they have a journey. Tony Stark wasn't interesting because he was Iron Man. Iron Man's just the guy in the metal suit, which is pretty cool, but it's not enough. Tony Stark was interesting because he was a selfish billionaire who slowly became someone who was willing to sacrifice everything. The suit was the superhero, the character was the story. I am Iron Man. Captain America wasn't just the guy with the shield. He was a man that lost everything he knew and had to find his place in a completely different world. Thor wasn't just the strongest Avenger. He was someone who lost his father, his mother, his brother, his home, and eventually had to figure out who he was without any of those things. That is why the big moments worked.
And you said your sister and your dad.
Both dead.
But still got a mom, though?
Killed by a dark elf.
A best friend?
Stabbed through the heart.
You sure you're up to this particular motor mission?
Rage and vengeance, anger, loss, regret, they're all tremendous motivators.
Captain America lifting Mjolnir wasn't exciting because a hammer moved. It was exciting because audiences understood what that moment meant.
I knew it.
Tony Stark's sacrifice wasn't powerful because Robert Downey Jr. said a famous line.
And I am Iron Man.
It was powerful because audiences had watched him become the person capable of making that choice. The actor was the delivery system. The journey was the reason it mattered. And this is where Marvel's current problem begins. They are looking at the final moments and forgetting everything that made those moments possible.
We're gonna be okay. You can rest now.
It looked at the success of Infinity War and Endgame, and it focused on the things people could see: the characters, the actors, the scale, the crossover, the spectacle. But those were the ingredients on the surface. They weren't the reason the meal worked. Now I get it. If you owned a restaurant and one meal made billions of dollars, your first thought probably isn't, let's completely change the menu. It's probably, can we make that meal again? Looking at you, James Cameron. The problem is, Marvel looked at the finished meal that everyone loved and forgot how they made it. They forgot the recipe. They forgot how to cook. They said, the patrons really love that 8-hour slow-cooked lamb shoulder. What if next time we just microwaved it for 2 minutes? The meal's going to look somewhat the same, but it ain't going to taste the same. And this is the problem with nostalgia. Nostalgia reminds you how something made you feel, but it doesn't remind you why you felt that way. It remembers the payoff, but it forgets the work. Imagine watching The Lord of the Rings and starting with the Battle of the Black Gate. You have armies, you have explosions, you have heroes making sacrifices. It looks incredible, but why should I care? Because the battle isn't what creates the emotion. The journey creates the emotion. The battle is where the journey pays off.
I am Iron Man.
The original MCU wasn't successful because Marvel announced one day all these characters will fight together. Nobody cared about that in 2008.
Kill power.
People care because every movie gave them another reason to be invested. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Avengers, Civil War, Infinity War. Every step built trust. Every step added another piece. By the time Thanos arrived, audiences weren't excited because there were more superheroes on the screen. They were excited because it felt like 10 years of storytelling had finally arrived at its destination. The executives in Hollywood looked at Infinity War and Endgame and just saw a crossover. Audiences saw a journey finally reaching the finish line. Everything I've said so far is just a theory, so let's test it. Marvel has just released the Avengers Doomsday trailer. So, what is the trailer actually selling? Is it the story? Not really. We still know very little about what actually happens. Is it the new characters? Not really. Most of the trailer is built around people, places, and ideas we already recognise, and most of them, not that many people are interested in. So what are we actually watching? Well, listen to the music, watch the pacing, look at the speeches. The trailer has all the emotion, all the scale, and all the atmosphere of the end of a great saga.
You will return as brothers and sisters.
The only problem is, it hasn't earned that feeling yet. There's a moment where Thor tells everyone to put aside their petty squabbles.
Put aside your petty squabbles.
As if we're meant to know what they are. And all I could keep thinking was, isn't the universe about to end? Again? Shouldn't we already be past all that? But the new trailer isn't about what's coming next, what the future holds. The new trailer's just trying to get you to remember what came before. Remember Infinity War and Endgame? Yeah, we're doing that again.
We're going to need a miracle.
And this brings us to Marvel's biggest problem after Endgame. It wasn't one bad movie, it wasn't one unpopular character, it wasn't even a disappointing Disney Plus show. The biggest problem was that the audience stopped knowing where the story was going. And anticipation is everything, because audiences will forgive a bad chapter, but what they won't forgive is wondering if there is actually a book. The original MCU always felt like it was moving somewhere, even when every movie wasn't perfect. There was still a destination. After Endgame, that became much harder to see. Marvel started creating projects that felt like they belonged in completely different universes. One project felt like a political drama, one leaned into horror, and another was setting up the next big villain. And then you had Thor. As I said, a character lost his father, mother, brother, and home, half of his people. He failed to stop Thanos. He went through one of the most dramatic character journeys in the MCU, only to end up in a movie where he's riding his axe like a broomstick. And this brings us to Avengers Doomsday, because I actually think Marvel has correctly identified one thing. People do miss the old MCU. They miss looking forward to these movies. They miss feeling like every release mattered. They miss the feeling when a trailer dropped and everyone immediately started talking about it. They are missing the investment, and that's the trouble with just relying on nostalgia. Nostalgia does remind you of the feeling, but it doesn't recreate the reason you had those feelings.
It's not possible.
It's like trying to recreate your childhood birthday party by bringing back the same clown 20 years later. You can hire the same clown, you can play the same clown music, you can buy the same clown cake, but you didn't wake up that morning 8 years old. Your friends aren't the same, the moment isn't the same. The magic came from everything surrounding that moment, not just the one ingredient, the weird clown.
This is my son, Scar.
Now, before anyone says, but Robot Head, Endgame wasn't perfect, I agree, it wasn't. Actually, I prefer Infinity War. I think Infinity War was the more interesting movie because it took bigger risks. It lets the villain win. Endgame is the conclusion. Infinity War is the gamble. They're two halves of the same story, but Endgame had some problems. Like time travel? That was bloody convenient. It's basically the movie saying, don't worry too much about the story. We've got emotional moments to get through. But despite those problems, the ending worked because Marvel earned it. And that's something modern franchises seem to have forgotten. It's good to end something. Actually, ending a story is important. Tony Stark completed his story. Steve Rogers completed his story. Natasha completed her story. It was done. We were finished. Everyone was happy.
It's over.
Bringing everyone back feels less like confidence and more like desperation. Not because I never wanted to see these characters again, but because Endgame already gave most of them the perfect send-off. If you're going to reopen a story that already has a satisfying ending, you better have a bloody good damn reason for doing it. Because every time you bring someone back, you risk taking something away from the ending that made many people fall in love with them in the first place.
No, I don't think I will.
But wait, there's more. I had finished recording this video when an interview with Kevin Feige was released, confirming everything I said in this video, confirming that they learnt the wrong lesson. Feige said the build-up to Thanos was mostly in people's heads.
The Thanos build-up has built up in people's heads over the years.
Yes, exactly. That's the whole point. That's what great storytelling does. The audience fills in the gaps. They speculate, they theorize, they imagine what's coming next. Not because the villain keeps appearing every 5 minutes, but because they care about the heroes he's eventually going to collide with.
He sat on a chair at the end. He pulled the gauntlet out and said, I'll do it myself. Yep. And he yelled at Ronan on a video screen briefly. No
one was counting Thanos' screen time. The build-up wasn't really about Thanos. It was about everything that had to happen before the final battle. If audiences spent years building that moment up in their heads, I wouldn't criticize that and think of it as a problem. I'd call that one of the greatest compliments any storyteller can receive. He also added that Doomsday is the introduction of Doctor Doom.
And when we got to Infinity War, we said, this is really the introduction of Thanos to people. That's really what we're doing. That's how that movie was built. Yeah. That's what we're doing with Doom. Doomsday is a introduction.
And honestly, that perfectly sums up my concern. Because Infinity War wasn't really introducing Thanos. It was putting 10 years of characters we'd already fallen in love with through their greatest test. The emotional investment wasn't in the villain, it was in the heroes. That's the difference. And that's why recreating Endgame is going to be harder than they think. Because it wasn't just about introducing the bad guy.
We should be faced with an unthinkable decision.
So with Avengers Doomsday coming out, has Marvel learned the wrong lesson? Are they really trying to make a payoff without recreating the journey that made the payoff possible? Because what the audience loved about the Infinity Saga wasn't simply that these characters existed, it was that they had changed. We watched them fail. We watched them grow. We watched them earn every big moment. You can't recreate that with a casting announcement. Marvel, you have to build it.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
You were